Welcome to Nebraska Farmcast, a production of the Center for Agricultural Profitability at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. I'm Ryan Evans. The Glasgow Climate Conference ended on November 13th, and with me to discuss what the conference accomplished and what that might mean for Nebraska agriculture is Dave Aiken, UNL Water and Agricultural Law Specialist. Dave, good to be with you again.
Good to be with you, Ryan.
So first, what was the Glasgow Climate Conference?
Okay, it's the 26th United Nations Conference of the Parties regarding basically implementation of the 2015 Paris Climate Agreement.
And what did the parties agree to at the conference this year?
Well, not very much. They agreed to reduce methane emissions, to begin phasing out coal-fired power plants in favor of clean energy, to speed up the use of electric vehicles, and to reduce forest loss. However, the United States and the other industrial countries did not agree to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions sufficiently to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees centigrade.
So what is the Global Methane Pledge?
Well, this was the one that got the most support, I think. 108 countries, including the United States and the European Union, but significantly not China, agreed to reduce methane emissions 30% by the year 2030. And it's up to each country to determine how they will do that. In the U.S., the largest sources of methane emissions are livestock production and oil and gas development.
And here in the U.S., has the government outlined how they will attempt to reduce methane emissions from livestock?
Not really. I think that's something that we're obviously going to be paying a lot of attention to in the coming months, and I suspect early in 2022 we'll get some idea of where they're headed with that. My best guess is that they will use livestock feed additives. I've seen stories on biochar, but also on algae and stuff like that to try to reduce the emissions from cattle. And then they'll also look at manure management incentives that have been used pretty successfully to date within the dairy industry and to some extent also in the hog industry. So that's probably, if I had to bet, I'd bet that's the direction that they will go.
And as far as what's known as the Global Ending Coal Pledge, what is that?
Well, that one did not get near as much support. I think 52 countries signed on to that. And developed countries pledged to transition away from coal by 2030 and developing countries by 2040. Again, I think 52 signed, but a dozen or so kind of limited what they agreed to do, that they weren't going to be able to do everything that was in the pledge or do it as fast as the pledge said. China, the United States, and India, which are the big three in terms of coal generating electric power, did not sign the pledge. And with the big guys on the sideline, this pledge will not accomplish very much, but I'm sure there's going to be a lot of pressure to try to get the countries to sign and to give it at least some type of qualified pledge.
And turning to electric vehicles, how about the EV pledge?
Well, in the United States, transportation, which is motor vehicles, and electricity are the number one and number two source of greenhouse gas emissions, nearly 60% of the total emissions in the U.S. And one strategy that the U.S. and frankly the rest of the world is looking at is trying to move to a cleaner electricity system and then having all the cars be electric vehicles instead of gasoline-powered vehicles. And so, and that's a strategy that would reduce greenhouse gas emissions significantly. It wouldn't get us to zero, but it would be a big, it'd get us a big chunk of the way there. So this EV or electric vehicle pledge is just to try to accelerate this. And developed countries will try to have all new cars be EVs by 2035, and then the whole world would try to do that by 2040. But if the EVs are powered by coal-fired or natural gas or oil, petroleum-powered electricity plants, then we're not going to be gaining a whole lot by going to EVs. So we've got to make sure that that those EVs will run on pretty clean electricity, before that really makes a lot of sense, because those vehicles are expensive.
Good. And one more pledge here. What about the forest loss pledge?
Well, in the United States, when we look at where carbon sequestration is occurring, 98% of the carbon sequestration into soil is from forests. So forests are a big deal globally in terms of trying to get to net zero emissions by 2050. And so forest management has been a big deal in the climate community, almost from the get-go. And in terms of what happened at Glasgow, over 100 countries pledged to slow and stop forest loss by 2030. However, many of the countries are already behind their earlier forest protection pledges, and this is a lot easier thing to say that you're going to do than to actually implement, just like all of these pledges.
Mm-hmm. So what's your overall take on the Glasgow Climate Summit?
Well, the Biden administration failed to persuade Congress to authorize even mildly restrict even mild limits on coal power plant emissions. So that means that the U.S. team at Glasgow could provide only weak leadership. And I think the weak hand, frankly, that the U.S. had to play reflected the weak overall results. And the effort, to limit carbon emissions sufficiently to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius becomes even harder each month and each year that we fail to meaningfully limit greenhouse gas emissions here at home.
And what was the Biden administration's climate proposal?
Okay, this was the one that they were hoping would be approved before Glasgow, but it's still they're still debating the fine print in the Senate as we speak. The Biden administration proposal would provide, I think $150 per megawatt hour of power to electric utilities delivering at least 4% of their total electricity to customers, that's an increase every year. And then the utilities who are under 4% would pay $40 per kilowatt hour for each one that they were under 4%. So it would, it's a fine for the dirty power generators, and then financial incentives to keep electricity costs down and invest in more clean energy for the utilities generating the cleaner power. And this proposal, which is, it's kind of structured in an odd way, and that's because it has to qualify for budget reconciliation in the Congress because they're scrambling to get the 51 votes needed to pass it in the Senate. It's already passed the House, but the Senate is the hang-up for now. And so this proposal was basically vetoed by Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia. Senator Schumer, the Senate Majority Leader, says he hopes to have a vote on this before Christmas. And so, we will just kind of have to watch the news and see what happens. But if they don't come out with anything very good in the budget reconciliation bill, then EPA will probably try to come up with something on the regulatory side. But that will also be challenging because there will be court challenges to that off the bat.
And are these results from the Glasgow Climate Summit important to agriculture?
Well, yes, but not necessarily in the way that farmers and ranchers would like. The weak climate policies in the United States means, in my opinion, that the market for ag carbon credits will also be weak. If the U.S. moves ahead with some sort of limits on carbon emissions, then the carbon markets might improve, even the ag carbon credit markets. But until that happens, it's going to be kind of where we are, or maybe even not as good as where we are right now. Secondly, we will see something on the livestock methane emissions. And I think that probably will come through USDA instead of EPA and will be at least somewhat producer friendly. But, we won't know till we see it. And so that's something that we're going to have to watch very closely for the next 2 months.
And any final comments on this, especially pertaining to what it means here in Nebraska?
Yes, Ryan, UNL scientists have projected that if we don't sharply reduce global carbon emissions, we'll begin experiencing up to 30 to 40 days of 100-degree temperatures in Nebraska every summer. And that would begin around the year 2040. And that kind of heat every year is going to have a lot bigger impact both on Nebraska agriculture and for those of us living in Nebraska, far greater than weak carbon credit prices or having to use some feed additives to reduce livestock carbon emissions. That weather change will be a bad game changer for Nebraska and Nebraska agriculture.
All right. That is Dave Aiken, professor and water and agricultural law specialist in the Department of Agricultural Economics here at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. For a transcript of this podcast, you can visit our Center for Ag Profitability's website at cap.unl.edu. Dave, I want to thank you for your time again.
Thank you.
Nebraska Farmcast is a production of the Center for Agricultural Profitability at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. For the latest research-based information and education resources to manage your farm or ranch operation, visit our website at cap.unl.edu. That's cap.unl.edu.